In a quiet residential area on the outskirts of San Jose, California, Jessica Watson was preparing breakfast in her two-story white-walled house as the morning sun streamed in. Standing in the kitchen, she gazed through the window at the trees in her yard. The gentle morning light softly illuminated the fruit bowl on the open kitchen counter. "Zoe, are you up?" Jessica called upstairs while carefully pouring pancake batter. As a freelance graphic designer working from home, this morning time was precious family bonding time for her. "Yes," came the response, followed by the sound of footsteps running down the stairs. Zoe, her 13-year-old daughter who had just started middle school, appeared with a hint of maturity beginning to show in her still childlike face. She entered the kitchen, her long black hair tied back in a ponytail, adjusting the collar of her school uniform blouse. "You have ballet lessons after school today, right?" When Jessica asked, Zoe nodded somewhat restlessly. Recently, she'd begun showing signs of typical teenage introversion, but she still never missed her twice-weekly ballet and swimming lessons. Watching her daughter, Jessica sometimes saw reflections of her younger self. "Where's Dad?" Zoe asked. "He already left for work. He'll be home late again today," Jessica answered with a touch of loneliness in her voice. Her husband Brian worked as a software developer at a major IT company in Silicon Valley. His meticulous and serious nature sometimes made him too dedicated to his work. It had become normal for him to return home after 9 p.m. on weekdays. Jessica remembered when they first met 8 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. She had been a single mother then, attending with 5-year-old Zoe. She still vividly remembered how Brian, noticing Zoe looking sleepy during the party, had gently helped her fall asleep on a sofa with natural kindness. After dating for a year, they married. Brian loved Zoe as if she were his own daughter, and their family of 3 was wrapped in gentle happiness. However, there was one person who had opposed their union from the start: Brian's sister, Rebecca. Rebecca, a former elementary school teacher, had retired 3 years ago due to chronic migraines. Though unmarried and outwardly kind, she had a somewhat controlling personality. She visited her brother's family frequently, especially recently, showing up almost without fail every weekend. "Is Aunt Rebecca coming this weekend too?" Zoe asked at the breakfast table, showing little enthusiasm. "Yes, probably," Jessica answered vaguely. Her relationship with her sister-in-law, who wasn't even her mother-in-law, rested on a delicate balance. Brian adored his sister, making it impossible to deny her presence. After breakfast, Jessica drove Zoe to school. Then she began work in her home office. While graphic design work often involved tight deadlines, working from home was a necessity to balance picking up and dropping off her daughter and household chores. In the afternoon, between online meetings, she folded laundry and started preparing dinner. While cooking, Jessica occasionally looked out the large window. In the backyard stood the wooden deck Brian had built last year during weekends. On holidays, they sometimes enjoyed family brunches there. She cherished these simple everyday moments of happiness. In the evening, it was time to drive Zoe to and from ballet class. When she picked up her daughter after practice, she noticed her usually bright expression seemed somewhat clouded. Even when asked, "What's wrong?" Zoe just replied, "Nothing." Whether this was typical teenage changes or something else, Jessica felt concerned as a mother. After 9 p.m., Brian returned home. At his "I'm home," Zoe burst out of her room and hugged her father. Though showing signs of fatigue, Brian gently patted his daughter's head. The three shared a late dinner, talking about the day's events. On the surface, it was a picture of perfect family happiness. However, a small anxiety had begun growing in a corner of Jessica's heart. Rebecca's increasingly frequent visits. Changes in Zoe's behavior. And sometimes, an inexplicable sense of unease. Still, she devoted herself to maintaining their peaceful daily life. At this point, she couldn't have imagined how that daily life was about to be greatly shaken. The changes had begun gradually within their peaceful routine. One evening, Zoe was working on her math homework in her room when she suddenly stopped writing. The air in the room felt slightly different. A sensation of someone being behind her sent chills down her spine. When she turned around, there was nothing there. Just the curtains swaying slightly in the twilight. Was it the air conditioning, or wind from outside? It's just my imagination, surely just my imagination, she told herself as she turned back to her textbook. However, from that day forward, definite changes had begun. The unsettling feeling whenever she sat at her desk. The heaviness of the air behind her. The sense of someone's presence. It grew stronger at night. Zoe's room was at the end of the second floor, with a view of the oak tree in the yard. That view, which should have been comforting, now felt eerie. The sensation persisted whether the curtains were open or closed. A few days later, when Zoe got up to use the bathroom at night, she thought she heard faint footsteps in the second-floor hallway. The clock showed 2 a.m. Her parents were definitely asleep at this hour. When she stopped to identify the sound, she felt slight vibrations through the floor. Though she peered into the darkness of the hallway, she could see nothing. But something was definitely there. Her heart racing, Zoe hurried back to her room. She couldn't sleep until morning. Even during the day, the sensation wouldn't disappear. The feeling of being watched grew especially strong in the living room. Whether watching TV or looking at her smartphone, she felt eyes on her from somewhere. Though sunlight streamed through the large windows and familiar furniture filled the familiar space, something felt off. As if a stranger was holding their breath in a corner of the room. It was on a Saturday afternoon when she finally confided these anxieties to her mother. It was a rare weekend when Rebecca wasn't visiting, and mother and daughter were sharing a quiet moment. "Mom, I've been feeling strange lately," Zoe began hesitantly, and Jessica smiled gently at her. "When you're going through puberty, it's normal to have such feelings," Jessica said, softly stroking her hair. However, even her mother's words couldn't completely dispel her daughter's anxiety. If anything, that anxiety grew stronger day by day. Then, around 6 p.m. on a weekday, the fateful moment arrived. Unusually, Brian had messaged that he'd be home early that day. Having finished an interim report on a major project, he could finally have dinner with his family. Jessica and Zoe were relaxing on the living room sofa while waiting to prepare dinner. Soft twilight light filtered through the windows. Under the orange-tinted sky, the garden trees cast quiet shadows. On TV, their favorite drama was being rerun. A peaceful moment between mother and daughter. However, this peace wouldn't last long. Suddenly, Zoe grabbed Jessica's arm tightly. Feeling her daughter's trembling fingers, the mother turned in surprise to look at her face. Her usual bright expression had vanished, replaced by one mixing deep fear and anxiety. Her face was pale, her lips quivering. "Mom, I feel like someone's watching us." Zoe's voice trembled. In that moment, an inexplicable anxiety spread through Jessica's heart as well. Outside the windows it was already dark, with only streetlights illuminating the garden. Though she scanned every corner of the room, nothing seemed amiss. Yet something was definitely wrong. The air felt heavy, as if filled with someone's gaze. From that day forward, Zoe's behavior changed rapidly. She stopped eating dinner with her usual appetite. Even her favorite mom's special lasagna went largely untouched. She complained of difficulty sleeping at night. She began having more nightmares that would wake her up. Afraid to be alone in her room, she spent more time in Jessica's office. Even when doing homework, she seemed unsettled and less near her mother. She had become reluctant about ballet lessons too. "Can I skip today?" she began saying. As a mother, it was painful to watch the light gradually fade from her once vibrant daughter's eyes. "Zoe's been acting strange lately," she brought up her concerns to Brian one night after he returned from work. The dinner table still held mostly untouched food. However, her husband's response was unexpected. "All kids go through this during puberty. Many of my colleagues at work talk about their parenting struggles too," Brian answered without looking up from his work laptop. Caught up in a major project, he didn't even seem to have the capacity to notice his daughter's changes. The numbers on his screen apparently seemed more important than the family crisis before him. Surprisingly, it was Rebecca who responded most sensitively to these changes. During weekend visits, seeing Zoe's listless state, she gently spoke to her. Seated on the sofa, Rebecca placed a gentle hand on her niece's shoulder. "I could stay over. We could talk, just us girls." On the surface, it was a kind offer. However, when Jessica heard those words, a small warning bell rang in the depths of her heart. Something else seemed to lurk behind Rebecca's eyes. Though it was just a momentary impression, something definitely felt wrong. Why would she suddenly want to stay over when she already visited so frequently? That sense of unease continued to nag at Jessica's mind. The night deepened. Moonlight quietly filtered through the living room's large windows. Jessica sat on the sofa, lost in thought. Her daughter's anxiety, her husband's indifference, her sister-in-law's unusual interest. Like puzzle pieces, they seemed to be gradually forming some kind of pattern. However, the complete picture remained shrouded in fog. "Mom, can I sleep with you tonight?" A small voice came from upstairs. Zoe was peering down from the top of the stairs. She looked just like when she was little. Jessica quietly nodded. And she still didn't know that this sense of unease would soon greatly shake her family. Outside the window, the night wind quietly rustled the trees. Their shadows cast eerie patterns on the house walls. Unnoticed by anyone, watchful eyes had surely captured the family. She woke earlier than usual that morning. The clock showed 5 a.m. Zoe was breathing quietly beside her. How many years had it been since she'd slept in the same bed as her daughter? Thanks to allowing it due to her recent anxiety, her daughter seemed to have finally gotten some good rest. Jessica quietly slipped out of bed. Stepping into the dimly lit hallway, she surveyed the house with different eyes than the night before. Something was wrong. She had decided to search the entire house this morning to find that something. First, the second-floor hallway where Zoe had first sensed something amiss. Walking carefully along the wall, she paid attention to even small scratches and dents she usually wouldn't notice. As the morning sun slowly rose, faint light began streaming through the windows. In that light, her eyes caught a small hole in the wall. This is. She suppressed the urge to cry out. The hole was about 2 millimeters in diameter. At first glance, it looked like it might be from a thumbtack. However, looking closer, there was something shiny inside. When she pointed her smartphone light at it, there was definitely what appeared to be a lens gleaming there. She felt frozen to her core. Her daughter's anxiety hadn't been imagination at all. Someone had definitely been watching them. From inside their own house. Taking a deep breath, she regained her composure. She couldn't panic. She needed to preserve evidence. Carefully, she took photos of the discovered lens with her smartphone. She also took several photos of the entire hallway to show the positioning. Then she continued her investigation downstairs. Next to the living room bookshelf, near the kitchen counter, in the stairway landing. She kept finding small holes. She took photos of each location, desperately trying to steady her shaking hands. 6:30 a.m. Almost time for Zoe to wake up. Jessica had to start breakfast. She pretended normalcy as she stood in the kitchen. While making pancakes, various thoughts swirled in her head. Who? Why? Since when? And what should she do? Good morning, Mom. Zoe came down looking sleepy. Good morning, did you sleep well? She responded in her usual voice as much as possible. Her daughter's expression seemed a bit more settled than the night before. The usual breakfast. The usual conversation. The usual smiles. However, Jessica's heart was in turmoil. Somewhere in this house, cameras were still watching them. She hadn't realized how difficult it would be to maintain composure while knowing this fact. 8:15 a.m. She drove Zoe to school as usual. Have a good day, she waved with a smile. Back in the car, Jessica immediately took out her smartphone. She checked directions to the San Jose Police Department. She arrived at the police station after 9 a.m. After briefly explaining the situation at reception, Detective Sarah Martinez was quickly called. Sharp eyes gleamed within her warm expression. Could you tell me the details? Led to a private room, Jessica explained everything from her morning discovery to the previous events. Her daughter's anxious behavior, the nighttime sounds, and the multiple cameras she'd discovered. She explained the situation as calmly as possible while showing the smartphone photos. Detective Martinez nodded occasionally, taking notes of key points. You've been through something terrible. At those words, tears threatened to spill from Jessica's eyes. The emotions she'd been desperately suppressing for the past few hours suddenly welled up. Let me explain how we'll proceed, the detective began explaining in a calm tone. First priority was preserving evidence. The photos of the discovered cameras were immediately sent to the Digital Forensics Department. Next, they needed to investigate the house. Identifying camera locations, tracing data transmission destinations, and collecting fingerprints. Could you tell me about who has access to your home? At that question, Jessica explained the family's daily routine. Her husband's return times, her daughter's school schedule, and Rebecca's frequent visits. When she mentioned that name, Jessica didn't miss the slight change in the detective's expression. We'll have an investigation team come in today. Could you please continue your normal routine as much as possible? Detective Martinez continued, carefully choosing her words. To avoid alerting the perpetrator, please try not to let on that you've discovered anything. Jessica nodded. Returning to her car, she felt strangely calm. The relief of having her previous anxiety and fear acknowledged as concrete facts. And the reassurance of having professional support. However, new anxieties were also sprouting. What truths would the coming investigation reveal? And how would those truths change her family? Starting the car engine, Jessica heaved a deep sigh. For now, she would focus only on protecting her daughter. The clock showed 10 a.m. 5 hours. She had to regain her composure before her daughter returned from school. Detective Martinez's call came at 6:15 that evening, after Zoe had retreated to her room. "Mrs. Watson, we have important developments," her voice mixed certainty with caution. Jessica's hands were still shaking as she took the call. The investigation team's thorough house search revealed facts beyond imagination. A total of 6 cameras were discovered throughout the house. Each was cleverly positioned to capture every moment of daily life. One by the living room bookshelf, positioned to overlook the entire room. One near the kitchen counter, angled to record detailed food preparation. One in the stairway landing, able to track family members going up and down. One in the second-floor hallway, monitoring nighttime movement. Most shocking was the discovery of 2 cameras near Zoe's room. One monitoring the room interior from the hallway, another monitoring entries and exits from inside the room. All these cameras had been embedded in the walls using professional tools. The wiring had been handled with expertise that would require specialized knowledge. "We found crucial evidence from security camera footage," the detective continued. The footage showed Rebecca visiting the house surprisingly frequently on weekdays. Most notably, she was seen bringing in a small tool bag. She would enter through the back door, avoiding neighbors' eyes, and there were signs of her doing some kind of work inside the house. Sometimes she would stay for over an hour. Furthermore, we've identified where the data was being sent. Technical analysis revealed shocking facts. All camera footage was connected to Rebecca's IP address. A sophisticated system had been constructed to stream real-time footage to her smartphone. The footage was encrypted and backed up to cloud storage. The surveillance had been meticulously planned on a scale far beyond imagination. That night at 10 p.m., Rebecca was arrested at her apartment. When the warrant was executed, her room had multiple monitors displaying real-time footage of Jessica's house. External hard drives storing past footage were piled on her bedroom bed. Surprisingly, Rebecca offered no resistance to arrest. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment. In the interrogation room, Rebecca began telling everything. Her confession revealed darkness deeper than anyone had imagined. Rebecca had lost her mother in a car accident when she was 5. Since then, she had desperately tried to be a mother figure to her younger brother Brian. After school, first caring for her young brother. Preparing dinner, helping with homework, putting him to bed. Their father immersed himself in work, making young Rebecca effectively the center of the family. "I had a duty to watch over that family," her words during interrogation mixed twisted affection with obsession. "Brian was practically my child. To have him taken away by a strange woman." In her mind, Jessica was merely a thief. Even Zoe's existence was something she found hard to accept. Her chronic migraines had made her mental state even more unstable. Her dependency on prescribed painkillers had also progressed. Her desire for a perfect family widened the gap with reality. Installing surveillance cameras was her twisted expression of protecting family. When told the truth, Brian was completely devastated in the police station's visiting room. "Why? Sister." His words came out as if being squeezed out, deep sadness dwelling in his eyes. Boundless love for the sister who had raised him since childhood. Unbelievable betrayal by that same sister. Regret for failing to protect his wife and child. Even the attending police officers were moved by the sight of him crying like a child. Jessica and Zoe quietly welcomed Brian when he returned home. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He knelt on the floor and bowed deeply. Self-reproach for not noticing his family's crisis while absorbed in work. Feelings of powerlessness for not detecting his sister's abnormal behavior. He repeated words of apology while crying. Seeing this, Jessica had made an important decision. She would not blame her husband. This incident had one perpetrator, and all others were victims. Her daughter who had feared Rebecca's twisted love. Her husband whose heart was torn by his sister's betrayal. And Rebecca herself, who had become mentally ill. "Let's get through this together," Jessica placed her hand on her husband's shoulder. Zoe also timidly approached her father and buried her face in his back. Perhaps this crisis would actually strengthen their family bonds. Rebecca was to undergo strict psychiatric evaluation and receive specialized treatment. The long-term effects of her migraine medication may have significantly impaired her judgment. However, most important was the deep loneliness and sense of loss lurking in the depths of her heart. The weight of responsibility thrust upon her at a young age had gradually warped her. "Let's do what we can to help your sister recover," Jessica quietly suggested to her husband. "Rather than giving in to hatred and anger, choose the path of understanding and forgiveness." It wasn't an easy decision, but she believed it was the best choice for everyone in the long run. All cameras were removed and the latest security system was installed. Physical safety was secured. However, healing emotional wounds would still take time. The family decided to receive regular counseling together. Zoe's psychological care was made the top priority. A month later, Zoe's smile gradually began returning. She started attending ballet lessons again. "No one's watching anymore." When her daughter would occasionally ask anxiously, Jessica would nod firmly. "It's okay. It's our job to protect you." Spring sunlight streamed brightly through the windows. Along with the arrival of a new season, the family's healing was surely progressing one step at a time. The holes in the walls were all filled and covered with new wallpaper. Though physical scars may disappear, healing emotional wounds still needed time. However, family bonds would surely become stronger through this ordeal. Jessica believed this as she quietly gazed at the family photo placed by the window. 3 months had passed since then. Rebecca continues treatment at the state mental health facility. During Brian's weekly visits, he says glimpses of his former gentle sister are slowly returning. New migraine treatments are beginning to show effects, and she's gradually recovering from drug dependency. The family of 3 continues their weekly counseling without fail. Zoe, who was initially withdrawn, can now openly talk about her feelings. After words like, "I was scared," and "I couldn't believe it," always follow, "but I'm okay now." Though small, it was a sure sign of recovery. The newly installed latest security system can check the house's status via smartphone. Ironically, it functions as technology to protect the family, the opposite of the previous surveillance. Brian's work style has also changed. He chooses to work remotely 2 days a week, consciously increasing time spent with family. Family time after dinner has become a new daily routine. And tonight, they're going as a family to see Zoe's ballet recital. Their daughter has been excited since morning, wanting to proudly show the results of her practice. Healing their wounded hearts may still take time. But they're definitely moving forward. Let's go, Jessica smiled as she called out. Their family's shoes lined up at the entrance, waiting for new steps forward. Sometimes the hardest trials can nurture the strongest bonds. This was something she knew from first-hand experience.